everyone. Welcome back. As you know, I'm Dr. Yvonne Cason, the president of Spiritual Awakenings International, and it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Brent Spirit. Brent Spirit lives just around my hometown, Toronto, Canada. And so I'm delighted that he was able to speak at our conference today. He was born in Pakistan and immigrated to Canada at about 1 year old. Since his childhood, he's been having a spiritual awakening process, including a Kundalini Awakening. And he now is following his passion of to become a psychotherapist. And he's also a spiritual guide, particularly for those who are going through Kundalini Awakening and a spiritual emergence process. He is the host of the Spiritual Awakening show, which is really wonderful, and also of KundaliniAwareness.org. So it's my pleasure to introduce Brent Spirit.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you all for joining me today. What a time to be alive. We can all connect from around the world and discuss the most exciting things. So I go by Brent Spirit, and today I'll be talking about Kundalini Shakti Awakening, in particular, overcoming some of the common challenges. So we'll be speaking specifically about this thing called Kundalini Awakening. However, as I've been enjoying the talks throughout this weekend, it seems that much of what I'm going to share applies across the board for all the various spiritually transformative experiences. So maybe you're not necessarily a Kundalini Awakening experiencer, but perhaps you've experienced a near-death experience. A lot of the things that we discuss today will apply, and this goes for, like I said, all the various interesting spiritual phenomena. So I'll go over briefly an outline of what I plan to discuss today to give you a bit of an overview here. Of course, I'll introduce myself. I'll let you know a little bit about who I am. We'll talk about what Kundalini Shakti Awakening is. We'll talk about the fact that this is a universal process, not just something that only a specific group of people experience. With that said, we'll explore how this process can look very unique for everybody that seems to have, this unfold in their life. Next, we'll discuss a little bit about some of the signs and quote-unquote symptoms of Kundalini Shakti Awakening, and I'll explain why I've put symptoms in quotations there. Then, of course, we'll discuss the common challenges and, of course, the solutions as well. And finally, I'll let you know a little bit about my recent project, KundaliniAwareness.org. So, as Dr. Cason introduced me, yes, I was born in Pakistan. I came to Canada with my family at 1 year old. I grew up in Brampton, Ontario, which is where I reside now. And throughout my life, I've been, in and out of different sort of meditative spaces and whatnot. But it's only in hindsight that I look back and can articulate those experiences. As a young child, I was, quite peaceful. Felt like, I could expand my awareness into infinity. And I thought this was normal and this was, what everybody could experience. But then during my teenage years, I felt some of the pressure of the world, pressure to become somebody. Time got a grip over me, the past and the future, and I began to suffer from depression and anxiety. And I sat to meditate. I heard about this thing called meditation. It could relieve anxiety, can relieve depression. So I said, okay, I'll try this. I'll look inwards, whatever that means. So I sat down on my couch, I looked inwards, and suddenly I began to have some very strange phenomena occurring. I began to have some spontaneous movements within my spine, within my neck. I was sort of going back and forth, bending, and I couldn't control these movements. I couldn't stop them. It was happening almost as if something had taken over my body. Very spooky, very unusual. So then I opened my eyes suddenly, and then finally I was able to, put a stop to those strange involuntary movements. So I said, okay, that's unusual. I don't know what that was all about. Not going to do that thing called meditation. But I found some benefits throughout my journey from just practicing mindfulness throughout my day. And I found some peace. Didn't take note of that experience. Had no clue what that was. And I actually didn't even talk to anybody about it. I just kind of forgot about it. Well, fast forward a few years later, I finally learned how to meditate by going on retreat. A few months later, I have some pretty profound spiritual emergence experiences where everything seemed to just be seen through as an illusion, including this idea of Brent, of me, of I. Quite unusual. Didn't know really what I was experiencing, but I knew it had something to do with my spiritual awakening journey. Fast forward a few years after that, I'm 23 years old and I have a profound Kundalini awakening, which involved a massive explosion of energy, of prana, of this Shakti from the base of my spine all the way up to the top of my head and out. It was quite a profound, transcendent experience. There was experience of unconditional love, of oneness with everything. It was very, very far out. I'm still to this day processing it now. So that was at age 23. Since then, I spent a period of intense, you could say, dark night of the soul. You can say there was an intense period of purification and purging of all sorts of the emotional and psychological content that I was carrying just by virtue of being a human being. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I went through a pretty intense purging period. And then on the other side of that, I received an invitation, a mission to serve as a messenger, supporting those going through spiritual awakening at this time on the planet. So at that point, I acknowledged that, okay, I'll accept my mission as a spiritual teacher. I have, of course, as you can tell, I love this topic of Kundalini. So that tends to be the area that I focus. However, I see that this is all a universal process. And much of what we're talking about, like I said, it applies across the board when we look at spiritual transformation. So as part of my mission, I've been called to create this website, kundaliniawareness.org. I also host the Spiritual Awakening Show. It's a podcast where I talk about spirituality, spiritual awakening, Kundalini, and I also host others that have had Kundalini experiences. And some of my guests that have been on my show, I noticed in the meeting here today, of course, Dr. Kaysan, I have a conversation with her as well, and many others. And my aim is to, blow the lid on this whole Kundalini topic and really showcase the variety of ways it shows up. And of course, the different challenges that people face and the solutions that they've found. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today together. As well, like Dr. Yvonne Kaysan mentioned, I'm also an interning psychotherapist, a graduate student. My aim is to follow in her footsteps and the footsteps of others within the psychology field that are openly acknowledging the validity of spiritual emergence, Kundalini awakening, and supporting clients within that context. I think it's very, very important. So, of course, this is the big question here, what is Kundalini Shakti Awakening? Now, if you ask all the people around the world throughout history to define Kundalini Awakening, if they've had direct experience, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to get a variety of different experiences, a variety of different responses. The word Kundalini comes out of Sanskrit, which is, of course, one of the ancient languages of India, the ancient language of yoga. It refers to a coiled snake, a coiled serpent. Maybe you're familiar with this idea of Kundalini being the serpent energy. But of course, there's a second word associated with this Kundalini term, which is Shakti. So the full terminology is Kundalini Shakti. Now, Shakti, of course, also a word out of Sanskrit, referring to the divine power of consciousness, right? The power, the force, the intelligent force of consciousness that is also associated with the divine feminine, the divine mother, Shakti. So we have Shiva, which is the divine masculine. We have Shakti as well, the divine feminine. So if you ask me a bit of a working definition here, just so that we don't get caught up too much in the semantics and the etymology and all of that kind of stuff, I'm a very practical person. I see a lot of people are suffering, going through this process, very confused. So I wanted to support people in that way. So my working definition is Kundalini is a divine spiritual force that lies dormant, coiled up at the base of the spine in most human beings, awaiting to be awakened. And I say most not because some people don't have the Kundalini. I say most because some people have their Kundalini, it's already awakened. They come into this life and it's already awakened and active. So for most people, it lies in this dormant state. Now, once the Kundalini Shakti is awakened, she begins an evolutionary spiritual transformation upon the entire body, mind, spirit system of the human being. Now, I referred to she. I said once she becomes awakened, because in my paradigm, the language I like to use, I like to refer to her as the divine mother, Kundalini Shakti. Now, others may not like that language, and that's okay. I think she's very understanding. And if you want to refer to her as God the Father, source energy, Shakti, consciousness, whatever you would like, it's all applicable here. All applicable. Ultimately, it goes far, far beyond words. So once this force begins to move through our system, often there's a period of what we may call purification or purging. As this energy begins to move through our system up the spinal column, it works through each of the chakras, and within each of the chakras, we store all sorts of different content, emotional content, psychological content associated with things that we've accumulated throughout our past. So as this energy begins to move, it's kind of like a pipe cleaner. We're moving through a bit of a dirty pipe, you could say. And as it moves through this pipe, it begins to bring up all of the dormant content, and that can cause this experience of purification. Now, once we make it through this purification period, which I'll be discussing more and sharing some tips for navigating it, I like to refer that we come to a point of relative completion, relative stability, at which there's an experience of self-realization, there's an experience of union with the divine, there's experience of oneness, there's a sort of transcendent meditative state of consciousness that we're able to abide in. Now, I use the loose term here, relative completion, relative stability. Once again, I'm not really interested in getting too caught up in exactly what these states are. Some may call it, nirvikalpa samadhi. Some may call it full enlightenment or full liberation. And then even if we look at enlightenment, there are various stages of enlightenment. So we get a lot to unpack there. But we can just look at this idea of relative stability, relative completion. It leaves a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of breathing room, and allows us to also acknowledge that the work never stops. It always continues. It always continues to unfold. I like to refer to this process as if it's a flower that just keeps blossoming, infinitely blossoming. Put simply, the purpose of Kundalini is to support our evolution from mundane human beings into spiritual human beings. And as we know, evolution is not a one and done type thing. It's an ongoing movement, So this force of Kundalini, it's universal, right? We all contain this within us in some way or another. For some, it's dormant. And even in her dormant state, she's still managing some of the processes within the body, the beating of the heart, the breathing of the lungs, digestion, putting a person through puberty, a pregnant mother, helping her to develop the fetus, whatever it may be. This force of Kundalini is the intelligence of the body. It's the intelligence of consciousness. And so she has lots of work to do, even in this, you could say, dormant state. However, we're also, as human beings, like tadpoles, we're like caterpillars. There is the potential to move into another stage of our evolution, which is, like I said, a spiritual human being. However, many don't know that we have this potential. Many don't know that we have the potential to continue our evolution within this one particular lifetime. In the same way that caterpillars may not know that they're able to one day become a butterfly. Tadpoles may not know that one day they're going to be able to, sit on a rock on land. They may not know this until it begins to happen to them. Now, because some people never get to this point in their journey, they may be, understandably so, skeptical, doubtful about the validity of this experience. And that only makes sense, right? It seems kind of far-fetched for a caterpillar to believe that they can one day fly. But of course, as we know, it's true. And the same can be true for us and within, our spiritual journey as well. So the Kundalini process, it is a universal evolutionary phenomenon. So I've been referring to yoga, right? The traditions of India. However, this is a universal phenomenon. It's a universal phenomenon that we see around the world throughout history, right? So it comes about with different language, different symbology, different maps and different processes are used to describe this very broad process of spiritual transformation. So some within Christianity may report being transformed by the Holy Spirit within. Of course, they refer to this force of the Holy Spirit moving through their body, and they can feel it in a palpable way. It sounds to me in the same way that we refer to this force of Kundalini energy moving through the body, right? The Tibetan Buddhists, they also acknowledge the potential of activating an inner fire through certain practices called tumo. And the practices are, of course, supporting a person to make their way towards enlightenment. Tumo, the inner heat, inner fire, Kundalini as well, can sometimes be quite warm, quite hot within a person. As well, within mystical Judaism, there is the acknowledgement of presence that they refer to as the indwelling of God, God dwelling within the human body, and they refer to that as Shekinah, right? So it's a universal thing that we see across the board. In my view, this is the diamond at the center of all religious traditions, is this process in particular, spiritual transformation, around which various traditions and religions are formed. I like this language because, of course, as we've been discussing this weekend, we can explore from so many different traditions today, especially with the advent of the internet. However, there are some that are making some efforts to also discuss this process in a more neutral way, right? In a neutral way, using neutral language. So I've recently been in touch with the Emergent Phenomena Research Consortium. So they refer to some of these phenomena as emergent phenomena, which, they're making an attempt to sort of distinguish it away from any particular religion or tradition. I think that's quite a valid approach as well. So as I was saying, this process is universal. However, across the board, if we look at each individual on a micro level, we're going to see some very unique experiences that everybody has. So no two people are going to have the same Kundalini process or the same spiritual awakening process. The previous description I made about the energy moving up the spine, chakra to chakra, I have to admit, I was throwing you for a bit of a loop. That's a bit of an simplification of the process. Some experience the energy descending from the top of their head down into the body, and then it begins to work in a sort of top-down manner. Some can't exactly pinpoint the direction that this process, this energy, this force is moving. It seems to be moving in multiple directions at once. So it's very nuanced. There's no black and white ways of really understanding this, which can make it a little tricky. And that's one of the common problems that we have, which we'll be talking a little bit more about. But overall, it's important to understand that your experience will likely vary greatly in intensity and speed and frequency and the quality of experiences. So some, like myself, for whatever reason, I've had very profound, powerful awakening experiences. Others I've noted have very gentle, gradual experiences, and they don't really have many key specific moments where they can report, and it doesn't mean that they're less evolved or behind or they're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean that those who are having even more intense experience have done anything wrong either, because I know that even those with very gradual awakenings do make it to these very expanded states of consciousness where there's, deep love, expanded states of unity consciousness, oneness with all that is, a very deep connection to the divine, to God, however you would like to call it. So because the process is unique for everybody, however, it's difficult for some people to do some research and find out what they're going through if they happen to stumble into this type of process. And that can be one of the tricky parts about this, because in the past, a lot of this was kept secret. You would perhaps have to go to an expert and discuss with them, but first you'd have to find that type of person. Whereas today we've got so many different practices that we can engage in, and a lot of them can trigger profound spiritually transformative experiences, Kundalini awakenings, and people don't know what's happening to them. And so that's why I'm doing this work, and that's why I'm so happy that we're here today to discuss it, to raise awareness about all of this. So let's look a little bit at some of the signs and quote-unquote symptoms of Kundalini awakening. So as I said, I've put symptoms in quotations here for a particular reason. Now, in my view, I don't see Kundalini awakening as a problem. I don't see it as an illness, as a syndrome, as a disorder, as anything going wrong. If it was something going wrong, then naturally we can say, okay, these are the symptoms of the problem. But I don't see this as a problem at all. And so that's why I just want to make this point here, that all of the things that I'm going to describe in a second, they may be challenging, they may be difficult, but that doesn't mean that this is something going wrong. And it's not something that we need to solve, reverse, shut down, or make it go away. Okay. If it happens to you, whether you were seeking a Kundalini awakening or not, it doesn't mean that anything is going wrong. It's in fact, quite a blessing to be given this type of opportunity. So it's kind of like puberty, right? We have some confusing, challenging experiences during puberty. If you're going hair under your armpits, if you don't know about puberty, you may say, this is something going wrong. What is this? But if you know about puberty, you say, oh, okay, this is a sign of a natural transformation. Okay, this is good, not a problem, nothing to stress out about. So as I go through this list of signs here, I want to just make it clear here that I'm not a doctor. And some of the symptoms See, I've made the mistake myself here. Some of these signs can coincide with some genuine illnesses and whatnot. So if you have any doubts, there's no harm in going and getting a checkup from your doctor as well. Okay, because as we know, you can have very profound spiritual awakening experiences like Kundalini Awakening, and sickness is still in the cards for all of us, because that's part of being a human being. So we'll look at some of the signs here. One of the most obvious, though, like I said, not necessarily for everybody, is the energy rushing through the spine. This energy can move up and down. It can be intense. It can be subtle. We can have spontaneous movements. We can have spontaneous vocalizations, speaking in tongues. These are known as kriyas in Sanskrit. We can also be called spontaneously into meditation. Perhaps we've never had any experience with meditation. We close our eyes just by sitting down on our couch and we're going into a very expansive state. We can have shifts in perception of ourselves and the world, right? We can feel like we're one, interconnected with all that is, with the divine, with source, with nature, with others. We can, of course, have the variety of various mystical experiences, many of which many have talked about throughout the weekend here. We can experience bliss in the body, almost like it's flowing through the nervous system, flowing through the veins. We can hear and see unusual things, clairaudience, clairvoyance, all of the clairs, these things can come about. We can also feel ungrounded. We can feel almost as if we're like a bobblehead with a lot of loopy thoughts, things like that. We can have significant spiritually charged dreams. And I know many were speaking about dreams throughout this weekend as well, with incredible spiritual themes. One thing that I think is very interesting, a very interesting sign of Kundalini process unfolding in an individual is genuine interest, genuine hunger for information about this topic. In my view, those that aren't really experiencing it don't really have much interest in it. They may scoff at it. They may look at it and say, oh, that's weird or that's interesting. Anyway, moving on, and they kind of forget about it. But those that are on the brink or in the midst of an awakening see this material and they just, really want to consume a lot of it. And one of the most common signs, as well as the challenges, is, like I mentioned, the emotional and psychological purification process. So that, of course, they have listed here as the first common challenge. The next common challenge is confusion. It's confusion. This seems to be one of the most widespread experiences that many people have, is confusion. What is happening to me? What is this? And with that, there's experiences of loneliness and isolation. As well, people end up being mistreated. They may end up being mislabeled for what they're going through. Some may have spontaneous, non-ordinary phenomena. The signs that I mentioned about Kundalini Awakening can bring about a bunch of different challenges as well, especially because it's happening spontaneously without a person actively doing anything to trigger it. And as well, like I mentioned, many people feel ungrounded throughout this process. So the emotional and psychological purification process. As we know, growth within any context, in any dimension, anywhere in the world throughout history, it's never come easily. It's always come with some sort of challenge, right? And so with spiritual growth, it's no different. It's no different. There's always going to be some sort of challenge. And for many, the challenge mainly revolves around this emotional and psychological purification period that we go through as the energy of Shakti begins to move through our system like a pipe cleaner. Like I mentioned, uncomfortable things from our past, memories, feelings, emotions, pain can even begin to arise that we've suppressed, bottled up from throughout our life. And this can be quite challenging. It can be quite challenging. Some may refer to this as karma, being burned up. Some may refer to it as trauma, surfacing, to be reprocessed, to be integrated. There's many different ways that we can look at this. But ultimately, we can understand that within our nervous system, we are storing all sorts of content, kind of like if we had a backpack. And every time that we accumulate some sort of pain throughout our lives, maybe it's through some sort of difficult experiences, abuse, bullying, stress, all sorts of different challenges that come and go in life. If we don't process that content in the moment, we put it in our backpack, and it's like we're putting a brick in our backpack. And on some level, we're saying, I'll deal with this later when I have the time, the space, the energy, the support, right? And so now when we come to this point in our Kundalini Awakening journey, and this point in our spiritual awakening journey, on some level, we say, okay, I think I'm ready to now look within this backpack and deal with some of these things that I wasn't able to work with earlier in my life. And so with courage, with understanding, with trust, we allow these things to come up. We allow it to be released. We look in our backpack. We work with those things with courage. And this is what the process is about. It's kind of like the intelligence of our body vomiting, purging after we ate some food that went bad, right? We don't necessarily know that the food is bad. If we did, we wouldn't eat it. But then when we eat it, then our body says, oh, this is not good. We got to throw this up. So the body naturally, spontaneously begins to purge. And when we understand what's happening, we say, okay, I understand what my body is doing. This is uncomfortable. I don't want to vomit. I don't want to purge, but let me just get all of this out of my system. So we trust in our body, we surrender to it. And that's, that's wisdom, right? And so we can apply that same type of understanding to our Kundalini process as all sorts of content begins to arise. We can say, okay, this is uncomfortable. My body, my Shakti, my higher self, God knows what it's doing, and I trust in this process. Confusion. So like I said, this is very, very common. Because awareness of this process has not been adequately raised, many are uninformed that this is even a possibility, right? So today we have many spiritual practices. We've got meditation, we've got yoga, we've got breath work, we've got chanting, we've got the use of plant medicine, psychedelics. All of these things have been marketed and advertised as a solution for increasing well-being, reducing stress, right? All of this, enhancing creativity, enhancing our relationships. And this is all valid, and many people engage in these practices and experience, valid benefits. However, all of those things that I mentioned, all those practices that I mentioned can also be powerful triggers for Kundalini awakening. So an individual like myself goes to meditate just to find some relief from anxiety, and suddenly they're having a Kundalini awakening. And they may say, I'd never asked for this. I didn't know about this. What is happening to me? And naturally, they may go, okay, well, I'll go and ask the facilitator, the teacher, the guide, hey, what is all this that's happening to me? I'm having energy moving up my spine. I'm having out-of-body experiences. I'm purging. I'm crying. My body's moving spontaneously. And the facilitator may say, I don't know what that is. Never heard of that. And these are maybe people that are claiming to be, experts in their field of whatever it is that they're offering. And this can cause a person to feel very, very confused about what they're experiencing. They may not even be able to put two and two together and realize that their meditation or their yoga or their psychedelic use is one of the underlying reasons for them to now be going through this next stage in their evolutionary process. So this can cause people to feel betrayed, scammed even. It can cause people to ultimately just feel quite victimized, understandably so. Now, some people may be seeking this thing called meditation or mindfulness without any idea of chakras or energy, and they begin to have these type of experiences. They may not have even heard the word chakra, right? They might not have even ever heard the word, prana or spiritual energy. So they don't even know what to Google, right? They don't even know. So, and I've encountered people that for years, they just weren't able to put any of their experiences into words. And, they've, been quite troubled because of this. As well, some people can end up being confused because, as I shared, there's a wide array of various signs of this process. And not all of those signs seem to be related. If you don't know that you're going through Kundalini awakening, you may say, before bed, my body starts to shake. During the day, I'm crying. And somebody may not be able to put those two things together and realize they're part of the same process. So they may be trying to resolve multiple various issues in multiple different ways without seeing that this is all one process unfolding sort of under an umbrella. And this can lead to further confusion. As well, because of that, there can be a lot of loneliness and a lot of isolation. So some may understand that, this is part of a spiritual transformation. They may feel that, okay, I'm going through some sort of spiritual transformation. Now, what do I do about that? Who do I turn to, right? They may not know who to speak to about. So they may share about this with their family, their friends, maybe their therapist, their doctor. And because it's so far out, because it's not, a common thing that people have acknowledged, they may be met with skepticism. They may be met with doubt. And they may be told, don't talk about this anymore. Some people get quite afraid when you begin to speak about these things. And I think on some level, they are afraid because they acknowledge, well, this could probably happen to me too. So let's just avoid it. Don't talk to me about that. As well, some people, they feel safest throughout their life within their religious organization, within their religious community. So they think, okay, I'm having some sort of spiritual transformation, seems to do with God. I feel closer to God than ever. let me go and talk to my religious community about this. And so when they bring it up, their religious community may say, no, 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 this is not part of our paradigm. You know, some maybe refer to this as demonic, or they may say, you know, this is blasphemy. Or they may say, you know, who are you to have this experience? They may feel jealous, and then that can cause a person to feel ostracized from their community. So somewhere where they felt most safe throughout their life within a spiritual context, now they're being pushed away from that place too. So they can be caused to go into you know, deep, deep isolation. The next phase in that sort of unfolding is often being mislabeled and being mistreated, right? So many are called crazy. Some in certain contexts are even given, you know, lifelong diagnoses of a sort of mental health issue. And then that the treatments for that particular issue may not apply to what one's going through with their spiritual emergence or their Kundalini awakening process. So they can cause even more difficulty within a person's process. As well, you know, though this process has been documented throughout the world, throughout history, there are, you know, great academic works being done and scientific works being done here. Many within the field, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, aren't open to this, and they aren't open to this. And so if a person happens to go to one of those doctors, they may feel, you know, misunderstood, and this can lead to quite a challenging thing. And I've heard many, many horror stories of people having, you know, challenging awakenings, and they go to the right place. They go where they're, you know, where everybody would advise a person to go, you know, go and speak to your doctor about this. And the way that they're treated ends up being some of the most, you know, traumatic experiences of their entire life. They may not be treated in a compassionate way. You know, nobody sits down and says, okay, talk to me about this. People are, you know, quickly dismissed. And of course, that's why I'm so appreciative of all of the people within this community that are making headway and breaking some ground in this space to shift the culture a little bit. But this is a very common issue that arises. The other common challenges are spontaneous, non-ordinary phenomena. So, like I mentioned, a lot of things may begin to happen involuntarily to a person. So when I sat to meditate, my spine began to involuntarily move. That was the intelligence of Kundalini, moving my spine in a particular way that was necessary for what stage of the spiritual awakening journey I was at, even though I did not know at the time. So people can have spontaneous movements, right? The body can begin to vibrate, to shake, to jerk, to jolt, can look like muscle spasms. The neck can bend, the spine can bend. People can engage in various mudras with the hands. The tongue can go in all different types of positions. People can have spontaneous vocalizations, right? Glossolalia, speaking in tongues, chanting, screaming, yelling, crying, laughing. This can all happen as well. It can all happen in conjunction with other spontaneous movements as well. So some people can go into a full-blown expression, dynamic expression of what I may refer to as spontaneous yoga, spontaneous ecstatic yoga. These things can begin to happen. Spontaneous breath work as well. So as we know, breath work has become quite popular, engaging in breathing in various patterns. However, these patterns can also happen to a person spontaneously, because the intelligence of the body, of the Shakti within, knows how to breathe the person in a particular way to facilitate their healing and their development, to put them into certain states of consciousness. So it doesn't have to be done forcefully, right? This can happen spontaneously. We can go into spontaneous meditative states, like I said, without any effort. Some can find themselves in total silence, total stillness, without any actively trying to engage in those types of meditations. Sounds nice if you're, you know, hanging out in the evening after work, but if this is happening to you, you know, when you're trying to get your work done, it can be quite a challenge, and it can be very confusing, especially if you've never experienced those states of meditation before. You may not know what really that is. You may not know how to describe it to others as well. Some may experience psychic phenomena, right? You know, various things like, you know, the ability to perceive the future, to perceive the past, telepathic communication. Some may experience receiving downloads of information in a flash. all of the different heightened extrasensory abilities, clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance, even clairalience, being able to smell things that aren't necessarily there. All of this sounds very cool and exciting, right? Like some superpowers. However, I encounter many, many people, and many of which I'm sure are here today, that feel very overwhelmed by these experiences, very overwhelmed. They're looking for ways to turn them off, to shut them down. They may not understand them. They may feel like, victimized by their experiences. As well, these experiences can be used as healing gifts, right? So sometimes we have these extrasensory abilities to be used to heal. You can spontaneously perform healings on oneself, spontaneously perform healings on others. So this can happen. It can also make a person feel quite confused about their purpose here on earth, right? They may have thought that they're here for one thing, and now they're become a healer spontaneously. It can cause a person to have a bit of an existential crisis as well. Some may have all sorts of mystical experiences like I described, leaving their body, visiting astral planes, having encounters with various non-physical beings, energetic experiences. There's no limit in all of these types of experiences, UFO encounters, all sorts of things like that. And like I said, I've never encountered two people with the exact same mystical experiences, which can also make it quite challenging to find others to relate with. And then naturally, around all of this, people can have quite difficulty in their relationships, right? Their life can get turned upside down in many, many dimensions. You can also have feelings of being ungrounded. So feeling as if we are depersonalized, depersonalization / derealization, also known as DPDR. We can feel dissociated. We can feel as if we're stuck in a sort of meditative space, just witnessing our body, witnessing our mind from a very detached place. It can bring a bit of spaciousness, a bit of peace, a bit of distance. However, it can be very difficult to relate with our body, with our emotions, relate with the people in our lives, to focus on our work, our responsibilities and whatnot. It can be very, very difficult. We can feel like we're having a lot of loopy thoughts, having a racing mind, a lot of emotional and psychological content can come up. And this can be quite challenging as well. So this is one of the most common things that I encounter with people working through their Kundalini processes, that they're not fully grounded and integrated into their body. They haven't embodied their awakening process. And this is understandable. It's a phase for some on the journey, but ultimately it revolves around this idea of feeling safe in the body, soothing the nervous system into a state of relaxation so we can really allow ourselves to be fully energetically balanced across the system. But until we find safety, it can be quite a challenging experience of being ungrounded. So let's talk about some of the solutions for the common challenges. So I've got unconditional love, trust and surrender, self-care, creating a container. We can meditate. We can raise awareness and find the others. We can forgive those that don't understand, and we can acknowledge our blessings. So to begin here, unconditional love can be used as a healing balm. So in my view, to be spiritually mature means to be able to look upon the world without judgment. And when I refer to the world, I'm referring to all of the various phenomena that can come and go. Uncomfortable things, pain, ugly things, beautiful things, all of it's looked at with a sort of impartial eye, right? So this is the step one of love. No judgment, unconditional, no conditions. All is welcome. All is seen as part of the divine spectrum of light. Because if there's only one thing here, that's God, that's the divine, that's consciousness, well, then everything is included, including the ugly stuff. Somehow, some twisted way, even the ugly stuff, even evil, it's all included here. So love looks at it and says, okay, I see you. You two are part of the divine spectrum of light. So this is how we can move through some of the difficulty that can arise for us as we go through our process. So we can offer ourselves unconditional love by experiencing any of our thoughts, emotions, feelings, sensations, anything that can come up within us. We can say, I see you. You're uncomfortable, painful memory, but you two are part of the divine spectrum of light. And therefore, I offer you unconditional love and recognition, right? I see you. I love you. We can refer to that idea by saying Namaste. The light in me recognizes the light in you, right? Very easy to say that to our friend after a wonderful yoga class. Oh, Namaste, right? How about saying that when we're going through a difficult purging period where we're having difficult memories coming up and emotions coming up, saying, namaste, painful thought, painful emotion. I see you. I'm not fighting with you. You're welcome here. You can have your moment in the light before being released. And that's how we can move through and heal quite efficiently. So just like with puberty, we didn't trigger the process of puberty with our ego, with our mind. Just like that, we can approach the Kundalini Awakening process by trusting and surrendering into this intelligence that is, beyond our mind. We did it once before as we went through puberty, right? We did it once before. The same attitude, right? So there's an innate wisdom within our body, mind, spirit system, which is Shakti, which is Kundalini, right? It knows how to carry this process out in the same way that it knew how to carry out the development of your body from when you were a young child up until now, right? So we already know how to trust and surrender. We've done it before. So we can learn how to apply that attitude to this process as well. So in the same way that when we were going through puberty, we felt hungry. So we just reached for more food. We put more on our plate. We didn't think about it. We didn't necessarily have to count calories. We just kind of felt intuitively that that's what we needed to do. We felt tired, so we slept in a bit more. Naturally, same thing can apply with our Kundalini process. We can allow things to just unfold naturally, organically. We don't have to overthink it. Self-care, right? So self-care, we have to take care of this body, mind, and spirit system at any point of the journey, but especially during Kundalini Awakening. So much goes on throughout this process. So many difficult, draining, exhausting experiences can come about. So really need to focus on self-care. That doesn't mean that, we're working, we're running marathons or anything like that per se. It's just doing the best that we can in all the ways that we know how, right? So nothing super fancy. Sometimes people say, I'm going through Kundalini Awakening. What fancy super complicated visualization or pranayama breath work or meditation should I do? But meanwhile, they haven't really put much attention on their hydration, right? They maybe are not sleeping well, right? If we can put our attention there, then we can allow the body to do what it needs to do naturally, spontaneously, organically on its own, right? So eating well, staying hydrated, moving gently, resting, tidying up our space, also very important for self-care, for our mental well-being, just tidying up, spending time in nature, very healing, being within community like we are today, and also living in an ethical manner, right? Living in an ethical manner that allows us to keep our mind spacious enough so that we can work on all the stuff from our past. But if we're not living in an ethical manner today, it gives us a lot of mental turbulence that we then add a whole other layer of content that we need to work through. So if we establish some aims to just live, according to some morality. I like, some of the ideas in Buddhism, say, for example, right speech, right? Something I'm working on myself. We can just do that for ourselves. It can really make a lot of space for all the other messy stuff to come up, right? Rather than creating more of a mess for ourselves. We can also create a container. So we can establish a safe space, right? Where we can go for our Kundalini process to unfold, right? So as we know, like I've been discussing, the process can bring up all sorts of emotional, psychological, even physical things. Now, rather than having all that stuff happening just randomly throughout our day, say, for example, we go out to a restaurant and then having, some spontaneous emotional outbursts or some spontaneous movement happening, some spontaneous kriya happening when we're out of the restaurant, what we can do instead is create a safe container that we go into where we allow this process to unfold. And what I've found with myself and with many, many other people, if we establish a container, which means a space that we go, a time and space that we go to allow this process to do what it needs to do, then throughout our day, it doesn't necessarily need to go all haywire, and we can actually function somewhat with some degree of stability. But if we don't establish a container, then the energy, the Shakti, the Kundalini says, all right, this is going to happen when it happens, and that may not be at the most ideal time for you, right? So we can relate with the energy in this way. If we consider the masculine, the feminine dynamics, if you look at my image here, we've got a woman. She's experiencing all sorts of various dynamic experiences, emotions moving through her body, energy. There's all sorts of things coming off of her body, all various colors, all sorts of different things are flowing, right? This is the feminine, the beauty of the feminine, the variety of the feminine, the dynamism of the feminine. And then, of course, we have the masculine, which is the container, the rigid structure, right? The rigid structure containing all of that, right? So that it doesn't spill over into her life, causing all sorts of chaos unnecessarily. So consider this image and see how you can create your own container. This can be alone in your meditation space, in your meditation room, right? It can be on retreat. And this is why, throughout history, people have established context for spiritual development, like ashrams and monasteries and caves and retreats as a container so that they can do all of this work, right? We can do this work in community with others that are, of course, understanding of what we're going through. Our journal can be a great container where we just write and express, without judgment. Not everything is able to be released onto the paper, but then, of course, we keep that journal to ourselves, contain it. Psychotherapy as well, right? We work with somebody who acknowledges the variety of emotional and psychological content that can come up within a human being. And they're not there to judge. They're not there to share it with another person. They're there to work with it with you, right? So that's another container. Of course, with various spiritual teachers, with healers. So one of the containers I mentioned is, of course, meditation. So this is how we can move through this process with meditation. So the way I like to think of meditation is just to simply allow and observe. So once we've got some spiritual awakening going on, that means there's a force moving through us. So we don't necessarily need to do much else besides allow that process to do what it's doing and just observe, right? So sometimes people think that they're not good meditators. They say, my mind is too noisy. I'm too emotional. I can't concentrate. I can't find peace. Well, I say, hold on, wait a minute. Where did this idea of meditation having to be peaceful even come from? If we look at the most, famous meditator of all time, the Buddha, right? We look at his story. He sat down under the Bodhi tree before becoming the Buddha. And Mara, this demon, came to bother him, to taunt him, right? And it's through working with Mara, working through that experience, then he eventually, of course, attained enlightenment. So even this guy, Siddhartha Gautama, sat down on the Bodhi tree. He didn't have a peaceful, beautiful meditation. It wasn't easy, right? All sorts of things came up. So the idea that our meditation needs to be peaceful is just a complete myth, right? So we can allow all sorts of things to come up within our meditation, emotions, thoughts, movements, whatever it may be. You can cry, you can laugh, let it all come, let it all come. Eventually, in time, there will come these periods of deep peace and stillness. But if we chase them, often we chase them away. So this is something to consider as well. Finally, we can acknowledge our wins, right? So many people say, Kundalini Awakening is so challenging. All sorts of emotions are coming up. It's painful. It's difficult. Nobody understands me. There's some bliss, but nobody understands me and I'm scared. I say, hold on. Wait a minute. You described bliss. That's pretty interesting. Let's put some attention on some of these wins, right? So as many people will say, yeah, I've definitely done a lot of healing. I'm definitely feeling more expansive and my state of consciousness is very expansive, but I'm still suffering a lot. And I say, okay, I acknowledge your suffering. It's valid. I know it's difficult, but let's give a little bit of attention to some of these benefits you've gotten out of the process. And that can help us to shift our attitude and to take a step back and to see that we're not victims here. There are wins. There are benefits that we're getting out of this process. So you can ask yourself, well, have you had expansions in your state of consciousness? Whether they come and go, have you experienced that? Yeah, perhaps. And have you healed? Have you grown? Have certain topics that once bothered you or triggered you, are you now made peace with them? I think that's very significant, right? I think it's very significant. So we need to acknowledge our wins. As well, we've got to forgive those who don't understand, right? So one of the common challenges, very widespread, like I said, is people being misunderstood, mislabeled, judged. But I think we have to make some peace with that. So if we think of Jesus, he's been crucified, he's on the cross, people are taunting him, and he says something to the effect, he says a prayer, he says, Father, forgive them for they don't understand what they're doing, right? So I think we can take a page out of Jesus's story there and say, okay, yes, I've been mistreated. Yes, the culture is not fully understanding of what this process is. Yes, people that you thought were there to help you weren't able to help you. Family, friends, professionals, very unfortunate. However, we can forgive them in our own time. I'm not saying we have to do it right now, but in our own time, we can set that as an aim, as a goal, and it can allow us to really let go of the resentment of any grudges and make peace with our experience. We can also take a step back and acknowledge this is really far out stuff, very, very far out stuff, right? Likely there was a time in your life where if somebody said, hey, I've been having a Kundalini awakening and there's energy and all of this kind of stuff, you may have said, you're crazy, right? So we can have a little bit of empathy for those that say that to us. And this is how I've worked to make some peace with that, because there were times where, if somebody came up to me and said this type of stuff, I would have said, yeah, you should, you know, whatever you're taking, stop taking that. You know, maybe I would have said something like that, right? So we have to make peace, make peace. And finally, as we go through this process, we overcome the difficulty by working on this idea of integration. Integration. So the theme of our conference this weekend is the dawning of expanded consciousness, and this is the aim of Kundalini, right? So we go through this expansion of consciousness, not just so that we can sit in meditation in our container, in our cave, and keep it all to ourselves. I think the aim is to integrate it into our world as human beings and to relate with one another from this new expanded state of consciousness, from this new healed state, right? So often we are called after these experiences, any spiritually transformative experience, it seems, many people are called towards a life of service, right? So of course, service begins with ourselves through self-care. We serve ourselves, right, with compassion, with patience. And then we can begin to sort of spill that service over out into the world. And that doesn't mean that we have to become a guru, an author, a speaker. We can offer our service just within our community, within our family, in our own way. And it doesn't have to look like overtly spiritual work, right? It can just be, you know, doing the best that we can, abiding in the deepest state of consciousness that we can, and allowing that energy to radiate out towards others. And just like in the hero's journey, we return back to the ordinary world after being transformed. And this Kundalini process, if you haven't gathered already, this is the hero's journey that we're all on, So I want to talk to you about what I'm working on here in collaboration with the community and with all of you to raise awareness about this process, which is KundaliniAwareness.org. So our mission here is to further legitimize Kundalini awakening and spiritual emergence phenomena within the scientific community through rational discussion, research, networking, training, and education. So just like what we're doing here with Spiritual Awakenings International, very similar aligned missions here. We have a directory of licensed mental health professionals, as well as physicians that have openly acknowledged, hey, I've had Kundalini awakening experience, and I'm available and willing to support my clients in those areas. So if you happen to be a licensed mental health professional with Kundalini experience yourself, please submit an application to the directory. We would love to allow clients to be able to find you and receive your support. But not only that, the directory itself demonstrates, hey, here are people who treat mental illness. Some of them even offer mental health diagnoses, but they themselves are saying that they've had Kundalini awakening experience and that it's a valid thing. So I think the directory itself is useful for offering validity and credibility to this process. We also have a collection of stories submitted by various travelers of the path that have written in a reflective way about their experiences. So if you'd like to enjoy some of those stories, please check them out. If you'd like to submit your story, I look forward to reading and sharing it with the audience. As well, the director of licensed mental health professionals, as well as those that submit stories, they can be at any point in the journey. Not looking for experts. We're not looking for fully enlightened Kundalini masters, just people that say, hey, this is a valid thing, and I'm here to offer empathy and support to those that are also going through this process. We're also putting together a global Kundalini meditation. So this meditation will take place in 2026, March. It's a ways away, couple years, but the aim is to really spread the word about all of this and get all of the people that are on board with the Kundalini process to sit together to meditate and to see what happens together. We also have peer support available on the website. My friends over at When Lightning Strikes offer Kundalini support. Kundalini Collective, they offer Kundalini support as well. Spiritual Awakenings International hosts some sharing circles, as well as Toronto Awakening Sharings Group also hosts some sharing circles. There's a community on Reddit, r/Kundalini Awakening. There's also the EPRC is also working towards raising awareness about this material within, like I said, the scientific community. There's lots going on the website as well. We've got resources, we've got books, we've got, I've put together, I've curated some conversations and interviews and material online with some people in the space as well, like Dr. Kason, for example, Bonnie Greenwell, others that have really made a big contribution to this space. You can find some more about that at KundaliniAwareness.org. The aim with KundaliniAwareness.org is for it to be a bit of a landing page where, perhaps you can send somebody who is on the fence about what you're going through. You can say, hey, check this website out, right? look at all these people talking about this and look at who they are. Look at their credentials, right? These are grounded, rational, scientific people saying, hey, this is a valid thing. I'm not crazy. So that's the aim behind KundaliniAwareness.org. So I see I've got about 5 minutes here, so I can tell you briefly about the origins of this website. I wasn't sure if I was going to share it because it's a bit far out, but in December, I was on retreat, and I was having all sorts of very intense Kundalini phenomena during this meditation retreat. I was awoken in the middle of the night, and there was like a Harley Davidson engine rumbling in my heart. And in the corner of my room, I see the late great spiritual teacher Ram Dass. He's about 3 inches tall in the corner of my room. And he throws a lightning bolt. And this lightning bolt, as it comes toward me, it grows and it stabs me right in the back of the neck, and it electrifies my whole body with this power of Shakti, right? Very, very ecstatic electrocution, you could say. And in this experience, I received a download of a few things. I was shown some new ways to offer a transmission of Shakti. But after that, I was told Kundalini awareness. And I understood through a download that I would be called to put together this project to raise awareness about Kundalini. So over the next couple hours, I was wide awake in my bed, just receiving all of this information about how to put all of this together. And so that's the origin story of KundaliniAwareness.org. I invite you to check it out. I can tell you a little bit about the other work I have to support you as well as you go through this process. So you can visit brentspirit.com to find out more about myself. I host live meetings on Zoom where people can join to share about their experiences, ask questions about their experiences, and to come together and know that they're not alone. So community, like I said, it's one of the ways that we address some of the common challenges of this process. So this is something that I'm aiming to put together for you. And at the time, my meetings, they're free. You can join some of the community meetings there. I offer some courses on my website for staying grounded during spiritual emergence and integration. I also host a Spiritual Awakening show where I've had some really fascinating guests that tell their stories. And my aim is to show that this process shows up in so many different ways, and everybody works through it in their own different way. And from various different religious traditions, various different ages, races, all sorts of different people going through their Kundalini Awakening journey. So if you'd like to enjoy some of those conversations, I invite you to check them out. I share some of my own thoughts as well on the Spiritual Awakening Show podcast. It's available on Spotify and on YouTube. Check it all out. Thank you all so much for this amazing, amazing opportunity to be with you all. What a thrill. What a thrill. Thank you so much for supporting me on my mission here to raise awareness about Kundalini Shakti Awakening.
Right. Thank you, Brent. So if you have some questions for Brent, please put them into the chat. Now would be the time to do that. Your presentation was absolutely fabulous, Brent, and I really enjoyed it on many, 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 many levels. I thought it was real fascinating. I'll just tell you as people are thinking about their questions. Interesting coincidence. My Kundalini awakening also happened when I was 23.
Interesting.
So interesting coincidence. Today we've been talking about coincidence in numbers, but as soon as you said that age 23, I went, I think that's when my Kundalini awakening happened. Yep, it was. So I don't know if there's something special about 23 and living in the Toronto area.
Well, Yvonne, I've got to look up some of the dates and ages for your near-death experiences too, so I can keep them on my calendar.
Look for something to happen. Awesome. Awesome. And I also wanted to say how phenomenal I think it is that you founded KundaliniAwareness.org. I hope, by the way, you'll apply to become an SAI affiliated group so that we can post you on our affiliated group page and that people can find you that way, because this is absolutely needed. Now we've had a few questions in the chat. Let me just take a peek here, see if I can find one that's burning for you. Somebody asked a question. I'm having trouble finding it now because so many people are saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Do we need to have a guru to go through a Kundalini awakening? So what do you think about that?
No, I don't think so. I don't have a guru, and I've been going through Kundalini Awakening. I've had many encounters with various, spiritual guides, living, dead, in books, on the internet, whatever it may be. Ultimately, I like to say that the inner guru, the inner master, is the one that any external guru that's, doing good work is trying to point you towards. However, if you find an individual who you recognize as a fully enlightened, liberated being, and your heart sings, perhaps it's, a chance to spend some time with them and benefit, but not necessary, especially at this time on the planet. We're all able to connect and explore from all over. So I say take advantage of it.
Awesome. Another question we have here is from Ken, who says, just awesome. Noticed on your website that your organization is part of ASI, the Association for Spiritual Integrity, and I'm also a member of the Association for Spiritual Integrity. So Ken wants to know, would you like to talk about the ethical aspects of your work in the role of promoting ethics in spiritual awakening?
Yeah, so as I'm sure many of us are aware, there's been all sorts of ethical scandals throughout history within the spiritual domain. There isn't necessarily, especially in our culture, with the benefit of everything being so widespread, there isn't necessarily any one specific organization or tradition or culture overseeing that people are doing good work and not harming others. And this just, if things get if everybody has a platform, anybody can do or say whatever it is. And so that's why I appreciate the ASI, the Association for Spiritual Integrity. They're aiming to have some sort of ethical oversight, and I invite those that may be doing some spiritual work to check them out and consider taking part in that type of mission there. My draw towards psychotherapy was because I recognized that within psychotherapy, at least here in Canada, it is a regulated profession, and that means that there's a certain ethical guidelines that people need to abide by. And so that's one thing that I think the West has really contributed to this space is the ethical oversight for those that are doing spiritual work. In the past, and I mean, still today, there are different traditions that, of course, operate under ethics. But certain teachers go rogue and they begin teaching. And as we know, many of them end up harming others. And my aim is to also raise awareness about why that may happen, which of course, is many, many different reasons. But ultimately, I invite all those on the path to use discernment, trust your gut and keep yourself safe, employ boundaries, and, be aware that this is very vulnerable work that we're doing here in spirituality, very vulnerable. We have to really open ourselves up when people are suffering and they need help and support. And so if there are people out there that are looking to take advantage, we don't want to let them do that. So look out for one another and employ discernment.
Thank you. Wonderful, Brent. Jenny asks, can you discuss the difference between a Kundalini awakening and shamanic illness?
Yeah, so I'm not too astute within shamanism to comment too much, but in my research and what I understand is that many within shamanic cultures, those that are called to be a shaman, experience this period where they may refer to as suffering from shamanic illness. And it seems that they are going through many of the phenomena that I described, including a sort of emotional purification period. They may be also having mystical experiences, during which they are perhaps receiving downloads and insights and activating healing gifts. And it's after the shamanic illness that they emerge now as an initiated shaman. And so if we map that model and generally speaking over onto the Kundalini Awakening model, it seems quite similar. There's an initiation period during which a person goes through difficulty, comes out on the other side, and then is called to a life of service.
Thank you. Emma brings up a very interesting question, which touches on an issue you didn't discuss yet, which is about sexuality and the relationship between sexuality, sexual energy, and Kundalini. Emma asks, there seem to be a number of people who feel that Kundalini awakening is great because it will give you excellent sexual experiences. And they leave out the idea that Kundalini is about raising our consciousness. Could you please talk a little bit more about the relationship between sexual energy and Kundalini awakening, not about shame or repression, but what is the, in your opinion, the best way of orienting the sexual energy to dedicate it to the raising of consciousness?
Right. This is a great theme. So the way that I see it is that Kundalini works with all dimensions of the human being, emotional, psychological, spiritual, of course, sexual as well. And so with that, we have to acknowledge that there's may be some interesting themes that arise within the sexual dimension of our lives, just as there may be interesting themes within the emotional, psychological realms of our lives. So some may experience heightened libido, some may experience heightened sexual control, ability to transmit energy to their sexual partners, have shared mystical experiences through sexual experiences. This is all valid, and these things can happen. However, I don't think that this is the aim of this process. Not something that we should completely ignore. However, it shouldn't be marketed as something to only explore for sexual gratification. Many people may seek to explore these ideas for sexual enhancement in some way, and then they end up in a sort of crisis because all sorts of emotional stuff is coming up. It becomes a whole existential thing. Sexual energy itself, it can move in many directions. It can move outwards into the world for, say, procreation. Beautiful. It can also be moving upwards towards, say, the higher energy centers, towards the crown chakra, for example, towards the heart, even for love, unconditional love, connection with the divine, connection with God. And so, not that one or the other is we have to exchange one for the other, not necessarily so. As long as we become mindful that the energy can move in many different ways, that it can be used and channeled even for perhaps creation, not necessarily for procreation, but for creativity. So some great artists channel that energy upwards and express spiritually inspired artistic work as well. But ultimately, we work with all the chakras within the system, including the sexual chakra as well. And so a holistic approach is definitely needed, definitely needed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you for that answer, Brent. Dana has a question saying that Kundalini energy seems to be a lifelong experience for me, especially when I do healing energy work. She's a Reiki therapist. Do you find that Kundalini activity ebbs and flows in people's lives over the course of a lifetime?
Yes, that's what I feel that it does. It ebbs and flows. And I heard from one of my community members, Tommy, described it so beautifully. He said it's like the wind. It's always there, but sometimes it's very still. Sometimes it's maybe like a tornado, but it's always there. It never completely goes away. Towards the earlier stages, there seems to be periods where it's very intense. And as we become more integrated and embodied, and our nervous system is able to hold this force a little bit more steadily, it doesn't necessarily need to become like a full tornado, but it's always there in some capacity or another. And one way we can think about it's like, when we go through puberty, puberty is over, but the development and the changes within the human body continue, right? To continue in the same way, Kundalini process will continue.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I'm living evidence of that it goes on for your entire lifetime. And I predict that you will be too, since we both launched at the age of 23 this lifetime. What I wanted to say was we're at the end of their questions, so I'm just going to ask you a couple more questions. What do you think is the most important message that you'd like to give to people who think they might be in a Kundalini awakening, but they're not getting any external validation? I'm just going to describe the situation, which was myself, for example, when I was 23 and I took meditation in order to study better for my medical school exams. I'd be a perfect one of your candidates. I experienced a Kundalini awakening and a mystical experience. And guess what? The Kundalini has not stopped. And this is many years later. But it took me about 12 years to find somebody who would agree with me when I had finally come to my conclusion. I think this is a Kundalini awakening. What's your key takeaway points to help somebody come to a clear understanding and correctly label themselves as having a Kundalini awakening?
Right. It's very challenging to have these experiences within a culture that doesn't necessarily acknowledge it. So I think the first step is to acknowledge that if you're going through Kundalini awakening, you're potentially dealing with something that only those that have really experienced it will have any ability to understand you. I think that's the number one thing we should acknowledge right away. We cannot expect somebody who hasn't experienced this to understand. They may be super open-hearted and empathetic and open-minded, and they can hold space for us. But on some level, there's always going to be, they're not going to fully understand. And even to put it in a broader scope, within the community itself, I connect with many that are going through Kundalini Awakening. Very unique experiences as well. And people disagree. People disagree on topics, even though they've both had valid Kundalini Awakening experiences. So making peace and having reasonable expectations, I think that's important right off the bat. Next, I think it's to do everything you can to explore the material that we have to validate this experience. People in your life may never understand, but with the internet, we can connect with others like we are today, and we can say, okay, there's some people out there that are having similar experiences to me. It looks like that's what I'm going through, Kundalini Awakening. It can be quite difficult to discern exactly whether you're going through Kundalini Awakening or not. And so my approach, being very practical and a bit of a simpleton, is to say, look, it doesn't matter too much whether you're going through Kundalini Awakening or not, because the practices that I share, they're very simple and safe for anybody at any point on the path. Self-care, gentle meditation, allowing yourself to feel, think, or experience any emotion or thought that may arise within your system. Eating well, staying hydrated, exploring spirituality in your own way, whatever feels right for you, connecting with some sort of higher power in whatever way feels right for you. So ultimately, if you engage in those practices at any point on the journey, they'll be effective for your development. But that's, it's a big problem. It's a very big problem. And this is the reason for why I've put together KundaliniAwareness.org and why I'm here sharing about this, because I, like you, Yvonne, it took me some time to make sense of this. And I still have people that aren't convinced that I'm going through this, and that's okay. I've made peace with it because, like I said, how can they understand? How?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I think those are really beautiful words that I resonate with. That ultimately, someone said, and I can't remember who first said this to me, but it resonated as a truth. A teacher cannot take you further than they have traveled themselves. And I think that comes to the Kundalini process as well. People may have read books about it, but if they've not experienced it themselves, they are missing an essence of it. Or they may label that, as you said, that who are you to think you're experiencing a Kundalini awakening, that it's only supposed to be these people who've meditated in the Himalayas for 40 years under the guidance of a guru. You're just an ordinary mortal. So I think the work you're doing is incredibly profound. I just want to give you, do you want to say one last closing remark before we wrap up for today?
Well, I would like to thank everyone. Thank everyone for holding the space for me to come forth and talk about this. I feel so welcome here. And that's the feeling that I want to share with others with this work, is to know that we're on the leading edge here of the evolution of consciousness, the dawning of expanded consciousness. We're at the leading edge. So there's going to be some difficulty. There's going to be some people who are naysayers, who don't understand. And that's just what comes with the territory. That's what comes with the territory. And it's a great honor to be with you all traveling at the leading edge. So thank you all so much for all of your support. I see some of my community members here joining the call today, and I see you and I thank you all. Thank you all so, so much. Appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Brent, for an absolutely fabulous presentation. Thank you for having the courage, the vision, and thank you, Spirit, that you called Brent to be part of the world team raising awareness about Kundalini. Thank you so very much. It was a fabulous presentation.